Welcome to the Soul Sisters series, where you'll get thought-driven, inspiring topics for your soul with Vonne, Solis, and Brenda Rachel. I want to welcome you to this several-part series, and one of the reasons that Brenda and I are doing this is because we both live on Vancouver Island, and we are in fact blood sisters as well as soul sisters. And from the moment we started living side by side, and we literally live side by side. Brenda lives in the condo building next door to us on Vancouver Island, in central Vancouver Island. And in this series, when we first came to the island and we sat on the beach, remember when we were sitting at Piper's, and
yes,
we would just get into these conversations, right? That they were like really like, wow, we should have recorded that.
Exactly.
And there's no end to us doing that. We're constantly going, we should have recorded that. You're right. So once I started the podcast, Grief Talk Podcast, July 2022, I decided to reserve a special part of it just to Soul Sisters, where we could come together and share with you a whole bunch of stuff, not least thought-led, inspiring, practical tips, wisdom, what we've learned. We're both from the 50s decade. We are 3 years and 8 months apart. And a lot of people say, who's older? I could let you guess, but I'm the baby sister.
She is. She's my babe.
And Brenda is the oldest of 4 children. We have a lot of fun together, but one of the reasons we also wanted to do this to share with you, leave a legacy for each other, depending who goes first. We always talk about that. But it is to understand that for people out there, if you are sisters and you have nothing in common and you might not even be speaking to your sister, okay, you might not even think you love your sister. And I guess this could apply to having a brother too. I'm not really sure, but right now we're focused on soul sisters. And even if you do have a fantastic relationship with your sister, we're showing you how you can come from diversity, adversity, and completely different paths. And Brenda and I have actually ended up in a very similar spot in our lives in our mid and late 60s. We are both authors. We're both angel healing practitioners. And we are definitely very committed to a spiritually led life. So in all of these series, we're going to be covering a whole range of topics, not least coming from dysfunction, how different things in our life, church, spiritual principles, our experiences, both dysfunctional and very positive, have led us to choose to have, would you say, like the best life we can live, right?
Absolutely. I would say that the best life that I'm living is right now.
Yeah.
That I've ever had.
And not to spoil it, really, but, you know, I am a bereaved mom of my daughter who committed suicide in 2005. I will use the word committed because it is a fact. It is still a crime in Canada to take your life. So I'm going to call it like it is instead of skirt around the issue. And I do have a living son who's 31. Brenda, on the other hand, you don't have kids.
Nope. I don't have kids.
And the other thing that we want to share with you as we move into these episodes is how different we are. We agree we're on the polar opposite
spectrum for being sisters. If I like something, she doesn't. If she likes something, I don't.
Yeah. So basically, if we buy each other something, we have to do it. Do I hate it enough to give it to her? Sure enough. And I would say 95%.
Yeah,
we have different tastes.
Yes, I would
agree. Yeah,
I would.
So so what I'm trying to say is we're different in every single way, but we are soul sisters. Let's get to it. So welcome to part 1. So today, sis, I just really wanted to talk a little bit, but I mentioned that, that we have both led a really, a life really committed to a spiritual practice.
Right.
At whatever age it came to us. For me, it was when I was 25.
Mm-hmm.
And for you, well, what age would you say that you...
Oh, at 5.
At 5, okay.
Mm-hmm.
And so for me, I do remember, I'm going to sort of phrase this like expanded consciousness. For me, it was like I could not any longer sort of be imprisoned by just human restrictions, thoughts, beliefs, but I didn't really understand it in that way at that moment. And so for me, quite frankly, it was when I was pregnant, that 6 months pregnant. For anybody out there who's going through this or has gone through it, and it's really, really scary, and you don't know if your child is going to make it, your fetus is going to make it. And I had only gained 4 pounds. And that was so scary for me. And I went for an ultrasound and all this, and she was okay and everything. But that's what led me to go to Unity. And I knew somebody who was going to Unity, her auntie on the other side, who's also passed now. But she was, June was a huge presence in the Unity Church and quite a presence in our life too.
Yes, she was.
And she passed in 2017. And so anyway, she introduced me to Unity in Vancouver. And I remember sitting in that service, bawling my eyes out, because I think I have no other way to say it, but I think God was just within me and just comforting me and letting me know everything was going to be okay, because it was a very difficult time in my life. And I was actually separating from her dad, and it was a very lonely and a very scary time, and I had to leave Vancouver, and all those things were going on for me at that time. So it was a very comforting presence. And I don't know, I'll ask you your moment, but so for me, when we sob like that, if you've ever found yourself in a situation where you sob your guts out because you have had a moment of truth, for me, that was an awakening. An awakening can be something else for you, but it's when you are really overtaken by an emotion, because that's the only way we really can express ourselves, right? When these powerful transformations take place. And how that leaves you, and it left me changed. And from there, of course, I moved to Edmonton, went and lived with mom, had a wonderful baby girl 3 months later, and all of that stuff. And I've never looked back. So what was it like for you?
Okay, well, I, on the other hand, like, we were raised in a Christian home and going to a Baptist church, and I embraced the church from the age of 5, and I was always doing something in the church. Like, I taught Sunday school, I sang in the choir, and I was in girls' organizations, CGIT and Explorers, the other way around. And so always a youth group and things like that. So all throughout my adult life, there was never a point I wasn't going to some kind of church. That evolved into going to a different types of church as my consciousness expanded, without me knowing that it was expanding, and that I was just choosing or being led to go to different churches. Like, I went from a totally a Baptist church with very strict dogma, to my next church was a non-denominational group of people that met in a hotel ballroom. So there was no church.
So from a really young age then, you tapped into it way earlier than me. I don't even remember being 5, of course, but I do have a little story to share. When I was like 12, and we lived in a small town, folks, about an hour from Vancouver, in an area called the Fraser Valley, for those of you who are not familiar with British Columbia. And so you remember Billy Graham?
Yes.
The evangelist, Baptist minister. He came from a Southern Baptist ministry background.
Oh, okay.
So anyway, one day, and I was 12 years old, right? So Billy Graham comes to this Coliseum that we have in Chilliwack. And, he And I don't even ask me at 12 why I would have done that with a girlfriend, and I don't remember which friend I went with, but I did go. And he, did his sermon and so on. And then he called those who felt it wasn't that we were being baptized, but it was almost like for those of you who feel a calling to be of service to God, something like that. Mm-hmm. So I went up. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I actually had Billy Graham touch me, anoint me, whatever he did. And so what was really weird about that was I'm a kid, I'm by myself, and I don't even remember if other kids were doing that, going up on stage. But if you really think about the courage it took,
yes,
to do that
in a big coliseum,
yes,
yes,
and I didn't even know why.
Yeah,
I didn't know why.
Yeah.
But when I think about it today, I think that was my first real calling to my eventual purpose work that would be spiritual based. I didn't know what it would be, of course, and I had no idea. But I do believe, and I'm going to ask you about this, sis, if you believe that at various points in our life we can tap into our incarnation, certain points of our incarnation, even though we don't understand what we're tapping into.
Absolutely.
Which I also believe is kind of deja vu.
Yes, absolutely. I think any time for me that I've had a real almost feeling of being propelled to do something, whether it's to read something or to go to a church or to attend a service or to take a course. I'm a courseaholic. I took many, many, many self-development courses, trying to always find what I could do to make myself a better person. And I think when you have that nudge, although it was never a nudge for me, it was always like just that kind of, just like you knew you had to go down to the center of the auditorium, Coliseum, and be there.
Yeah.
That's the same kind of drive.
Yeah, you have to do it.
You have to do it.
Yeah.
No rhyme or reason.
Yeah.
Just
have to do it.
Don't question it. Don't sit there and go, well, what's this about? Or why am I doing?
Yeah,
exactly.
Okay.
Just go for it. Yeah.
Okay. Also, I want to say, in my experience, another thing that has stuck with me. So I just want to add to what you said. So it's that knowingness at various ages where you go, why did I do that? Whatever. But there's also, I think, I'm just going to ask you what you think about this. Those things that we do in our life that are memories, they are like memories ingrained on our soul almost. So the Billy Graham one is for sure. It's not that I think about it all the time, but it's very vivid for me. The impact of it. I couldn't tell you what I was wearing or anything like that, but I can tell you the impact of going on that stage. But the other thing that happened is, fast forward another, let's see, I was 12, so 25, when I was 25, and I had to move. And so that back to that experience, like of going to Unity Church when I'm 25. So now Unity is like another huge thing in my life where it's impacting me, and I'm crying my eyes out in the whole service. And another huge connection, I think, to what this incarnation was going to represent for me. And when I moved to Edmonton, the other thing that stuck with me is as I started this transition to expanding my consciousness about thought and just thinking things, I was reading the book Atlas Shrugged. And I'm not sure, Ayn Rand wrote that book. Her name's A-Y-N, Ayn Rand. And again, I was looking it up yesterday because the impact of that book, even though today I was like, what was that about again? I can tell you that it really impacted me and gave me permission to think beyond my, just my small little human, mind by myself as an isolated individual in my experiences. And so I looked it up yesterday and I thought, what did Atlas Shrugged stand for? And I'll read it here because I actually wrote it down. And it said that Anne's philosophy was all about in objectivism and really understanding the fact that we have to discover reality for ourselves and learn how to exist and act successfully within that reality.
Mm-hmm.
She also had a philosophy about the mind, to sort of paraphrase that, the mind is what we allow and choose it to be within that reality that we define for ourselves. And somehow, again, that just kind of was a light bulb moment. And I loved that book, and I've never read that book again, but that was all occurring as I was preparing to become a mother, for example. So in talking about this little segment, I just want to set it up as sisters. We both came from different experiences, but what I want to say is that at the core of it, and of course you can add to this if you want, at the core of it for me was there this undercurrent of a spiritual connection. I wouldn't say a connection yet necessarily to my soul, but certainly a spiritual connection, even though I may not have understood it. And so I sort of framed it in church, a Christian experience, because we were raised Baptist until, we quit going to church, which for me was pretty early. And Brenda was I would say, a remarkable leader. And I spent my donation money on candy before I got to my Explorers meeting. That tells you how different we might be. I remember that. What did you call that when you had to donate? Well, you had to bring your money anyway. $10, $1.50, whatever it was at the time.
Yeah.
This would be in the maybe late 60s, and I always went to the store and bought candy. I donated. It was a collection, and one went in the collection.
Yeah.
Okay. So I want to talk a little bit about church, and so moving it a little bit into this thing I've couched as the church, because that's sort of the institution that allows us to feel spiritual. I mean, I'm just largely paraphrasing here, right, for me.
Mm.
But you were mentioning earlier how, you started with the Baptist, then you went on to different churches. But what I would just want to sort of get at here is, through your life, church was important.
Yes.
What did church, I know you went to non-denominational, and as you went to church and as you got older, your consciousness expanded and expanded and expanded. But even from a really super young age, what did church, remembering that we came from a major dysfunction, which we'll talk about a little bit in later episodes, but what did church represent for you in looking back, if you can connect to that?
Well, I think for me, it was like I became a Christian and gave my life to Jesus with my mom in the basement of our house, praying against her trunk of clothes that were a huge, large trunk in the basement. And I sobbed and sobbed and sobbed. And I think the principle for me, so I understood at age 5 what I was doing, and that I wanted to do this, and I wanted to devote my life to walking as best as I could. As I don't really think I understood like being a Christian, but I loved what Jesus stood for, which was love. And just that was like paramount for me. I understood that. So I just really felt that all things could be achieved if I carried this love in my heart that I felt Jesus had for me.
Cool. So you did that trunk praying thing, or praying over the trunk with Mom when you were like 5?
Well, yeah, at the trunk. Oh, not over the trunk, but yeah.
Oh, okay, at the trunk. So
yeah.
For some reason, I'm just going to say Mom had this blue metal trunk.
It was like a big traveling trunk.
Yeah.
You kept stored clothes in.
Yeah.
To, when you changed them over from season to season, and her wedding dress was on.
Yeah, I was just going to say, I think her wedding dress is in there. And by the way, I got married in her wedding dress.
Yeah.
I don't know what that trunk represented, but if you've ever watched an old movie and they'll show you from a different era, like maybe the 40s or something, this trunk. And maybe what it really represented and was sort of symbolic of for me was Mom, I think, carted that trunk with her, certainly in certain years. Like she brought that to her marriage, and that trunk had that was her trunk.
Stayed in the house until I guess she left the house when she divorced Dad, and I don't know what happened to her trunk then.
Yeah, really cool. Anyway, so church was a foundational piece in our home growing up, and actually, in looking back at that, it sort of makes sense that it was. Our father actually came from a Mennonite background that he rejected and married our mom, who was the least typical of that type of culture, right?
Absolutely.
So it was pretty interesting that she was this super liberal person, artist, musician. She was gorgeous. And obviously the marriage did not last. It did not work. Because I believe kind of what's ingrained and instilled with us as children, I think there's a part of this that never really goes away. And for Dad, that would have been rigid, strict. Sinning, was a big thing, right? Can't do this, can't do that, can't wear makeup, can't drink, can't listen to music, can't dance. He came from that kind of environment, and Mom was all those things. And all I'm going to say is it added to the dysfunction at this point. That's all I'm going to say. So for me, the unity had principles of, peace, love, harmony, and, unity. Yeah. And so with these principles of peace, love, harmony, and unity, would you say that they have impacted, you or formed part of your foundation?
Oh, yes, absolutely. I think where I started to become much broader in my thinking from kind of the religious, I'm going to say dogma that I was taught, because it's strict. There's no forgiveness in what they teach. There's no deviating off the path. You're either a sinner or you're a good person.
Wait, so are you talking here even Baptist?
Yeah.
Oh,
yeah. All Christian,
fundamentally Baptist.
All Christian churches. Well, I can't say all. I haven't gone to them all.
Right.
But any of them that follow a specific set of rules, and there were definitely rules, which in most Christian churches, it's the 10 Commandments. And but within that, like as my sister said, as Vonne said, there was no dancing, no drinking, no movies. We never went to a movie. The only movie in my whole life living at home, and I left at 17, was going and seeing Moses when Moses came out. And I couldn't even believe that we all went as a family to the theater. But anyways, fast forward, when I started to become involved with non-denominational, more spiritual churches, that weren't even called churches. They were just groups. It led for interpretation, and that there was not just what the minister was saying behind the pulpit, was what you lived by. You lived your principles by what one person with his interpretation was saying on Sunday morning. And for me, I started to embrace the liberalism of having my own thought of what I was being taught, and what felt right for me, and what didn't feel right for me.
So would you say science of mind opened you up to that initially?
Absolutely. But science of mind, it's definitely a spiritual church.
Yeah.
But it's a different type of church in that we use the mind to create our healing journeys, and use the principles of what they call a spiritual mind treatment, which is a 5-step treatment process that you just walk yourself, very simple, to go through from what it is, the connectedness about that I'm connected with the oneness of God. There is only one God who I choose to call nature, spirit, whatever. There's lots of interpretations. So this was becoming more liberal now as to what I could reference as the divine that I chose to follow. I didn't need to call it just God. I could call it anything that I wanted, and we could all call it anything that we wanted that sat right with our soul. And so many, many times I referred to God as all kinds of different things: spirit, nature, the divine, oneness, etc. And so,
but would you say that God, like if you're in a heartbeat, in just a real heartbeat, and you're going to do a prayer up and Brenda and I are not like fundamentally Christian or religious here. What we're trying to talk about here is coming from that background. It instilled some type of foundation, structure maybe is a better word. And as we both went off and expanded our consciousness, but still choosing to have it within that sort of church type experience, whether you choose to meet in a community or a real church, that structure was very much instilled in us.
Yes.
As children.
Yeah. And I followed that through. Like in my life, I've been to, like I said, all the kinds of non-denominational churches, but also I was married in the Anglican church, and I attended the Anglican church faithfully for, I think, 2 years with my ex-husband, because we chose to get married in a particular church that was in the woods. And so we just wanted to really become familiar with the church that we were going to get married in. And I also went to the Unity Church. That was a church. And I went to the Anglican church that was right near my office in downtown Vancouver. I would go there at lunch hour and just go and sit in the pews and just look at all the candelabras they had at the front and just get some peace just sitting in a church pew when I needed some respite and stuff. And then on the other hand, I've just been, like, as Vonne was saying, just to meetings in people's homes for different things.
Yeah.
But I think the community of having another person, myself, and one other person, or many people, you can call it a church if you wanted to get, all with the rules of the church that you're wanting to follow, or just having a nice spiritual meeting. So I think at the time that I chose to leave, quote unquote, a church, well, when I think about it though, Unity and also Science of Mind, like they were called churches.
Yeah, for sure they were called churches. So I think the interesting thing, I just wanted to point out that you were belonged to a Baha'i community for a while too.
I did.
And we're not going to go deep in the woods with any of this stuff, but what I am saying is that from what I got from your book was that, it talk about being present and appreciating the beauty around us, live life with compassion and kindness for, I'm going to say, ourselves and each other, for sure. But what's really interesting is when you go, it's like what you're saying, like you choose to have a community that is that you can grow with, as you yourself grow in your consciousness and even with your experiences, because sometimes tough experiences can definitely bring you, tough experiences that bring you to your knees can bring you to also church or a spiritual life and practice.
Yeah, absolutely.
And
absolutely.
I would say, going back to what we talked about a little bit ago about being pregnant with my daughter and only gaining 4 pounds at 6 months pregnant and being terrified I wasn't going to have this little babe, I would definitely say that was a kind of falling to my knees. Not as much as when she took her life eventually, 22 years after she was born, but certainly the one thing that was like, I was going to be the best human and mom that I could be. And I tied those two things together, right? So the overall theme is that basically, I love what you said, that when you originally found the place it was that allowed you to interpret the teachings.
Yes.
For
me. Yeah.
But these principles.
And nobody made me wrong for having my interpretation. Like it wasn't like you're a sinner because you're deviating from how you're being taught, and
Yeah.
you need to learn it this way.
Oh, yeah.
Mm.
And so I love that, having the freedom to interpret, but still guiding your life by what are very common principles and practices amongst many denominations, if you will, or even non-denominational churches.
Yeah.
So all of that just to say church has been really important for Brenda and I.
Yeah.
Okay, so we're going to move now a little bit to manifesting and empowerment. And that moves nicely from the whole church thing and expanded consciousness, because I took from unity the principles of unity in their entirety. Every time I went to a Sunday, I don't want to call it sermon. They certainly weren't sermons, but they felt more like inspiring.
Well, just a service.
I came away feeling very empowered. I never came away feeling I was wrong, or, I always came away going, it was just so inspiring for me.
Yeah.
So manifesting became a huge part of that. I think I probably was in my 30s when I really, really took, and did the manifesting thing and looked at my relationship with money, just a whole bunch of things. I think I actually picked up A Course in Miracles, the book.
Yep.
I actually spent several months, sort of studying it. At the same time, I was doing some kind of course with Unity at the time. And I would have been late 30s, hitting 40 at that point. But here's the thing, I think I really always was consciously manifesting from my mid-20s on, and setting intentions and so on. But my practice changed. I still do it to this day, but here's the thing. I think that we can change our practice of how we intend and what we bring into our life based on our experiences, where we're at, and the more cumulative you have, and the more cumulative experiences you have, and the trust level you have, and the more, quite frankly, you see stuff working in your life. And Brenda and I both became angel healing practitioners. And we're going to be talking about that in later episodes. But as I moved away from just A Course in Miracles, and, also, if you tithe, you will bring more into your life. I never bought that one. But, like service work, what you give out to the world, you get back tenfold. That's a principle of, if not unity, it's certainly a principle I heard quite frequently.
Yeah.
And I will say, because I didn't really have a lot of money to tithe 10% of my net, I always felt a little bit like, oh, well, maybe I won't quite get as much back financially in my life. I'll get back in tenfold the exact items or service I give out. And it took me quite a few years to break away from that consciousness. So I was aware of this exchange of energy, if you will. Service, money, you get it back tenfold. That's sort of how I was raised on that. But at the same time, I was seeing results in my life and understanding that I was making the connection, I think, in my sort of mid-20s to, the next phase of the manifesting part of it, maybe a decade later, that I was seeing results. But it wasn't a dedicated conscious practice like when the angels came into my life. So how was manifesting powerful for you?
Well, I'm just as you're speaking, I didn't have really any kind of association with manifesting. I did about the tithing, and I never tithed. And because I just wasn't in a financial position. And I actually kind of abhorred that premise of needing people or having people feel that they didn't deserve or wouldn't get if they didn't tithe. That's what I got from it. In other words, if you don't put in your envelope 10% of whatever, either weekly or monthly, or however you choose to do it, then your life is going to be short by not how many years you live, but just things are going to be less available and won't come to you. I just said, well, then I'll have to live like that, because And then I can't remember where I just totally disassociated with the tithing in my mind having any correlation whatsoever with what I manifested.
But here's a question for you.
Mm-hmm.
You studied for a while to become a minister.
Oh, yes.
In the Science of Mind Church.
Yes.
And eventually had to give it up. And we'll probably touch on that again in later episodes. But what was at that time that you were studying to be a minister yourself, was it not that true that you recognized a church was a business?
Yes.
And so
yes,
I'm just curious, I don't want to attack Science of Mind or any church, but at that time, would you, as a person who eventually would have gained your own church, were they into tithing? Like requesting their congregation to tithe? Because ultimately I believe, and this is a personal belief, no one attacked me for it, that tithing is really just a form of fundraising to keep your basic administrative costs going,
right,
and pay the salary of the minister. Because in some cases, ministers basically depend on the congregation for financial support.
When I chose not to become a minister was through my illness. I was very, very ill and had to leave practitioner training class twice. But what I did understand at that time was all the politics in the church.
Okay, yeah.
There was a lot of politicking, and knew that the church was a business. It's just like anything else. They have to pay their costs, the building, etc. And I just decided that's not the route I wanted to go to have a church.
Yeah. Today, what do you think about manifesting?
Nothing.
Oh, okay.
I don't think about it.
But if you want something, do you consciously believe you can get it?
Well, I just ask the angels.
Oh, you just ask the angels. Okay.
Yeah.
Alrighty. Well, I still consider it a bit of a manifestation process, even working with the angels. And even though we're not talking about angels today, guys, we will talk about that. But it does change. You're right. It does change the approach to it, because when we ask the angels for something, that you're also working yourself with your mind to trust that you're going to get it.
I just know they're going to help me.
So for me, manifesting still is an important concept I teach in my coaching. One, because not everybody works with angels and, can send the order up and, hey, I need this. And then just watch it, sort of fall into your lap. And if it doesn't quite fall into your lap, I would say both you and I believe that it wasn't meant to be, or it's not time.
Right.
So
totally. Totally.
So that is a very different.
So I was just going to say, so that's totally for me.
Yeah.
Different than manifesting as opposed to divine timing.
Correct.
Okay.
Just so putting the order up, allowing these forces, Brenda and I, it's definitely angels. For other people, it could just be the universe. You'll hear things like that. But if you're new, what I want to just get across here is that, again, I was just sort of tying this all together, raised in a church where there's a power and people are praying to the God, above to bring them to deliver various things.
Exactly. And also, I think in a traditional church, also, if the person didn't get it, then it was viewed by other members of the church. Well, they must have done something wrong.
Yeah.
That they didn't get it. Or there's an automatic judgment based around what the person didn't get, because a lot of congregants will know when somebody's struggling within the congregation, and they'll just see their life go on and on and on, and the same way or get worse or whatever, and go, well, they mustn't be a very good Christian.
They must have deserved it, right?
Deserved it.
Something like that. So key point to bear in mind. So in bringing the consciousness that we both have done in various ways and through various, churches and, practices, but basically not that different, to where you all of a sudden go, wait a minute, I'm a spark of that force.
Yes.
I'm a spark of source.
Yeah.
And maybe I can and do deserve more. I have met people literally recently who believe you can't ask God for anything.
Oh my goodness.
You can't ask God for anything. You just take what God doles out.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah, well, okay. So we don't believe in that.
No.
So we have progressed and come through our years in life, our experiences, our dedication to our spiritual practice in ways they're similar and ways they may be slightly different. But overall, the understanding that, for me anyway, it's that we have the power within us to create what we want,
Right.
and deserve it,
Exactly.
and celebrate it,
Right.
rather than hang on to all of these. In fact, I think undeservingness and judgment and all of that is tied very much up in all of our pains and struggles from the past, including right back to childhood. Okay, so moving on, I'm just going to introduce the concept of trust here really quickly, because we're going to be coming back to it.
Okay.
But I just want people to sort of understand trust is a huge part of creating. Let's work with the word creating, the life that we truly want to be living.
Right.
And I think it's fair to say you and I are both living the life we want to be living today.
Exactly.
And have been for a few years, for sure. For sure. We both came to Vancouver Island 7 years ago. And so we'll be, 2016 that we came here, and have basically, I'll just say lived a charmed life.
Yes.
I often tell people, I just feel like I've lived
Best life I've ever lived in my whole years.
Yeah. And I've had a lot of wonderful things in my life. And I was actually speaking with someone the other day and saying, I haven't had to go to bed at night worrying about anything. And it doesn't mean I sleep better, but it just means I don't worry about anything. And, I felt a little bit guilty saying that because this person was going through some struggles. And then I said, well, wait a minute, I deserve this. So yay. And that is another reason we are doing Soul Sisters, is because we are examples of what we both, practice and teach and share with others in our various ways. And the life works for us, and my entire family, we're a very small family, but my entire family does live the same way, and no one has any complaints. And I'm owning that. I'm owning the celebration of that and the success of that. So one of the things that I got for recently reading your book, Broken Spirit, Awakened Soul, My Journey of Healing with the Angels. And as I did mention earlier, Brenda and I have authored 5 books between us, myself 3 and Brenda 2, and I'll have links to those books down below. And a lot of what we're talking about is in our respective books and how we teach and so on. But one of the things I got from your book, sis, is when you say, and this does come from one of the steps, the step 5 of Science of Mind, the healing practice,
The spiritual mind treatment.
Yeah, the spiritual mind treatment. Thank you. Is that the Creator, and I have to read this, the Creator does not require our input on how our desire is manifesting itself for us. And I totally love that. So this speaks to trust. And I don't want to get too deep in it because, as I said, we're going to be revisiting this. But I did just want to quickly ask you what you felt or what you have done over the years, because I think trust is a learned discipline.
Absolutely.
It's a learned discipline.
Yes.
What would you say has been the one, maybe 2 things that you have really relied on to keep you coming back to trust when you get out of it?
Well, I think number 1 would be my connection to the angels. That's number 1, is I totally trust that when something's out of sync, I immediately, and I'm really, really off balance, and I know immediately when I'm off balance, is I ask them to center me and to bring me back to that place where I just am going to be carried in their wings and know that I'm safe. It's all, for me, it's usually something has happened to really rock my world that I don't feel safe in whatever capacity in that moment or longer. With health issues, I still have ongoing health issues. Trusting that they will be there to show me each step of the way. The doors will open, and I always ask them to open the doors for my next step. So for me, that is sort of the key to trusting, because I just believe. I just believe with an absolute, unequivocal. There's no doubt. There's absolutely no doubt in my mind that I will be directed to whichever door I need to go through, that it will open. So,
yeah. I guess for me, trust is more about, I think I just keep coming back to, I'm kind of like you. I've sort of reached the point where I don't really not trust. And, but it has been a years-long journey, people. I just want to say that. It is something that we can have, and then something can happen in our lives. Like for you, it's, illness stuff, like, health stuff. For me, well, it's actually health stuff too. But it's whatever could come along and show you that, yeah, but I think I'm way past that. And so I would think I don't really have any trust issues anymore. I'm like you. We both just kind of put it out there. And
I think we both just, if I was speaking for us, but that we both just accept that in that moment, that's the way that moment's supposed to go. And that we know the moment's going to change, or for however long that moment lasts. And that, there's the saying, trust the process. Because life is a process. So to go from kind of being knocked off my rocker to getting back into stability, it's a process. And I always know there's a lesson of why I'm going through that. Nothing happens in my world for me to not learn something from that experience.
Yeah. I think we'll have to come back to lessons, because we don't have enough time to kind of talk about that all today. But I agree that there's a silver lining in every problem. That's how I look at things, or every challenge. And certainly if you can get your lesson, you get to move on.
Yeah.
Okay. So we're going to close off this. Definitely we're going to be closing off this part one today. And I did just want to share with you that one of the founding principles, a fundamental principle that I live by, is understanding that I am absolutely the creator of my experiences, and that I can create what I desire in my life, no matter what's happened. And speaking as a bereaved mom, that's a pretty big statement. That's a pretty big statement for me. There might be other bereaved moms, parents out there that are way ahead of me. I'm 18 years into it. And when I lost Janae in 2005, everything was stripped from me. So one of the first things I had to do was go back to what is my foundation, because the earth felt very shaky. I still remember walking and shaking, like, being very unsteady on my feet because the ground just did not feel like it could hold me. So that is, I just wanted to close on that note, is sort of what my founding fundamental principles are. And that is that what I just said, I have the power within me to create what I want in this life, and I do own my experiences. So I just want to ask if you want to share on a closing note, if you have something that's a very fundamental belief that you have, or practice or principle that you live by, that has guided you for, if not all of your life, probably all of your life, because it's our soul experience, right? Our soul is the incarnation, but that has guided you and is continuing to guide you today.
Well, I think that for sure for me is I create my own reality, but within that is every thought I think creates something.
I love that.
So when I look at what's happening in my world, because it's just my world, it's nobody else's, this world belongs to me. So whatever's happening in my immediate world, I've created. But where did the creation start with? It started with my thoughts. So if I really take a moment to observe what got me to that place, whether it's complete joy or peace or total off my rocker, what was I thinking? And how can I change my thought in that moment?
I'm going to close this off in just 1 second here, but I did recently have an interview with somebody, and we were talking about where did the thought come from? I'll leave you with that. So all things are thoughts. Thoughts bring us our creations. Thoughts bring us everything we want. But hey, where'd the thought come from? Anyway, ready for a latte? I am. Love you, sis. Love you too. See you next time from the Soul Sisters.